Greetings, everyone. Good afternoon, and Club President, thank you for having me, members and guests. I'm deeply honored to stand before you today to share just a little snippet of what this issue of human sex trafficking looks like in our state, really in our country, and in communities all across Louisiana. I want to thank our Governor John Bell and First Lady Donna Edwards for their leadership on this issue. I want to thank some of our lawmakers, Senator Ronnie Johns, Beth Mizell, Regina Barrow, and several other lawmakers here in our state for their bold leadership in addressing this issue. And I spoke with Senator Mizell a few weeks ago, and she told me she shared information with you guys. So I'm going to tag team on her presentation. But do know that we work closely together in this state to address this issue. Father Bahi, who's a leader also in our state on this issue, and so many others. We like to say that no one person can do this alone. We've traveled this state for the last 5 years, going through and through in every community, pulling together key stakeholders to understand what do we know about this issue? What are the strengths and what are the gaps? I will tell you that years ago, I started my career early on working at the Department of Children and Family Services, DCFS. It was DSS back then. And right out of grad school from LSU. And I knew nothing about human sex trafficking. But what I did know was that a young girl came into our office, one of my first cases. She was 12 years old. Her mother brought her into the office because she was running away to spend time with her father. But what we found out when she came into the office was that she was running away to be with her father at 12 years old, who met her for the first time at 12. He raped her and made her his lover at the age of 12. So from 12 to 13, she ran away. He trafficked her from abandoned house to abandoned house right here in Baton Rouge. At the tender age of 12 and 13, she was forced to do all sorts of sexual acts in abandoned homes. She was even forced to do sexual acts on her biological father. The worst part of this case was that we learned that her biological father had full-blown AIDS, and he didn't care. If we can only imagine the trauma that a young person, so young, who should be focused on school, who should be focused on all sorts of fun things, cheerleading and flag football, but they're forced at the tender age to do things that no child should have to do. We have so many cases, and I'll share information and stats with you in a minute. But these cases are all over the country and all over our state. And so when we meet these victims, and so many of you have already, you've worked in the trenches, we have former police chiefs and professionals here. You've seen them. They've come across your path. You may have seen them in a restaurant. You may have seen them in a bar, just hanging out, a sports bar. We have seen them. They may have passed by us in a hotel, but we may not have known the signs. Because our victims tell us that I was at the hospital and the hospital staff did not know. I was in the school crying out for help with my eyes, and my teacher did not know. I was in the hotel, and I was trying to get someone's attention, but they just didn't know. And so our office has taken a leadership role to go across this state and to address any audience, no matter how big or small, and to say, hey, here are the signs. If we can just educate one, we believe that we can save a life. Because when the victims are ready, and they're not always ready, When we present, we like to tell the truth, the raw, honest truth about this issue of human sex and labor trafficking. And I will tell you that sometimes victims are not yet ready. You say, why wouldn't they be ready? If help comes along to help them get out of the life, why would they not be ready? It's because sometimes if you can only imagine someone out of foster care who had no parents, no parental support, the trauma of going from home to home. I was a researcher at LSU and I did analyze data from DCFS. And the average number of placements from this 1 year of data, the highest number of placements that a youth in foster care experienced was 44 placements. 44 placements. If we could only imagine that youth aging out of the system after having 44 placements, loading that bag up, going to another home, loading that bag up, going to another home. And the sad part about that is when they age out, sometimes they're still homeless. They are homeless. And so what happens is this homeless youth, they may be at a low wage paying job, and someone comes along, and this is a real case, someone comes along and said, hey, you're walking home or you're in school, can I offer you a ride? And they may say yes. This young girl got in the car and never made it back to her home. She ended up, and this was a case in North Louisiana, a young girl who was working 2 jobs, but yet struggling still to make ends meet. Also in school, at a community college. She ended up, after taking a ride from a guy who seemed innocent with a baby in the back seat, she ended up at a pop-up shop in the back of this young man's home. Walked into this shop, this pop-up shop, and was made to strip, take her clothes off. He took new photos of her and then injected her with drugs, and she never made it back for months after months after months. So again, when we talk about the vulnerability, we have children and youth in our state who are very vulnerable. But it's not just those who are vulnerable. There was a young girl who was at a community college in our state, and her roommate offered her an all-expense paid for trip to Las Vegas. She said, hey, I've never been out of New Orleans before. So it sounded very attractive to her. And it was her roommate. But little did she know, the roommate was a recruiter for her boyfriend, who was a trafficker. She took this all-expense paid for trip, got off the plane. She had never rode a plane before. Plane landed, she goes into the hotel, all of the lights, the glitz and glam. But when she walked into her room, the boyfriend walked in. They described him as having name brand, Gucci, and all those things from head to toe. He walked up to her and said, give me your phone. And she was kind of confident, like, give me your phone. I'm not doing that. He slapped her, took the phone, made her go from state to state, selling her body, dancing for money, things that she had never done before in her life. A college student who it took months before she could return back to her family. This is just a snapshot. We can't even fathom the heinous nature of this crime. It is very dark. It is very real. Governor John Bell and First Lady Donna, they share publicly of a case that was right in their own backyard, a case that received national attention of a young girl being held in a dog kennel. A dog kennel. She was trafficked by 7 family members, labor and sex trafficking. They forced her to eat her mom's ashes, which they poured into a bowl, poured cereal in it, and forced her to eat it, her mom's ashes out of the urn. They shot her up close with a BB gun. The marks are still in her arm today. She now serves as a member of our Survivor Advisory Council. on the road to recovery. We have a survivor advisory council in our state that informs every aspect of our work. We listen to them. We call them the experts, and we tell them, you were in the life. Tell us, show us what programs, how we need to shape this, how we need to frame this so that we can be aware and so that we can share this information with the larger group. And so here today, I'll just show you, let me see if I can work this fancy clicker, a snapshot of what this looks like here in our state. We've contracted with Allies Against Slavery, a Texas-based organization, to analyze the state's data every year. This year was the first year that Allies gave us a snapshot of what this issue looks like in our state, prior to the Department of Children and Family Services analyzed the data. But of 60 service providers, which the law mandates, we received data from 40 service providers across the state, and here's the data. We had 932 victims served, 562, 64% were confirmed victims of sex trafficking. Another 30+% were suspected. So again, we had over 500 confirmed cases of human trafficking. When we look at the numbers, we see about 65% of our victims were under the age of 18. 65% of the victims under the age of 18. That is important to know. Let me tell you, our children are being targeted, and traffickers are going into the schools. I like to just be very real and honest about this. Traffickers are now sending others of their victims into schools to recruit others. So our kids could be at school and one of their friends say, hey, would you come to one of my sleepovers? And little do we know, that's one of the traffickers' victims who's now recruiting other children into their harem, is what they call it, into their stable. And so we have to educate our children. And I'm excited to say that we're working with the First Lady's office to implement an initiative into the schools, working with DARE, Crime Stoppers, school resource officers, to get this message to our kids in schools. You know, if you see something, if you experience something, if something's not right, here's how you report. And so we can no longer tiptoe around this issue. We have to arm our children with knowledge, because this is very real, and traffickers, again, are sending others into the schools to recruit for them. And this is not just high schools. Let me tell you, elementary schools. And so we also see that our victims are not just white or black. We had 45% white, 41% African American, and we also saw some Hispanic and a few Asian and a few multicultural as well. Gender, of course we know the data shows us that a large majority of our victims are females. However, we have males as well. Our males are not reporting. But we have more males coming forth to say, hey, I'm a victim. We see males being male victims in our massage parlors. We see male victims everywhere, okay? So please know, we have a male victim who was a part of our Survivor Council who shared with us that he was trafficked by his mom since the tender age of 3. Since the age of 3. He actually spoke at the First Lady Summit in New Orleans. And so again, mom had a substance abuse issue, and she trafficked her son to support that habit. I remember years ago when I worked for DCFS going to visit a mom who had a substance abuse issue. And then when you don't know, you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. But I remember going into a home where this mom had an 8-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son, and she allowed men to come into her home and to sleep with those children to support her habit. So when we say this is real, this is very real. So what are we doing? And it's in every part. We're seeing it in urban as well as our rural communities across the state. So I'll jump to this. What are we doing? What are we doing in our state to address this issue? We started years ago with awareness. We held the state's first symposium in 2017 to bring together key stakeholders. We brought together over 400 stakeholders across the state to say, hey, this is real. We had a panel of experts and survivors to really lay the groundwork that this is real. So we've been really pounding the pavement over the last several years, speaking to groups like yourself to raise awareness and to arm folks with knowledge. Since then, we were able to get funding from the National Criminal Justice Training Center to host regional summits across the state, which were very informative. We received the state's first real comprehensive report to say what are the strengths, what are the gaps in each region of the state. We used that information. I was in the Children's Cabinet then, but we used that information to write our first application for federal funding to address this issue. Because then we didn't have any resources to address the issue, any state resources to address the issue. I can gladly, proudly say now, through leadership of Senator Mizell and other state representatives, Ronnie Johns, we now have over $2 million state dollars allocated to address this issue in just a short period of time. So from 2017 to now, we've seen just a tremendous amount of support across the state. So in 2018, after writing that application, receiving that comprehensive report, Louisiana was the only state in the country to receive a federal award from the U.S. Department of Justice to improve outcomes for juvenile victims. We established and developed a model based from Texas, Massachusetts, and other states, known as the Louisiana Child and Youth Trafficking Collaborative. That word collaborative was so important because prior to what we saw when we did the regional summits and traveled the state, there were pockets of experts here and there. In New Orleans, we had our task force. In Shreveport, we had a community response team, but there was nothing really consistent across the state. What we also saw was that there was kind of this feeling of, hey, we're working over here, we're doing good, and there wasn't as much sharing of information and knowledge. What we realized is that we needed to bring everyone to the table. Every resource was so valuable and so important. So we began to do whatever we had to do. We began to stroke egos. We began to highlight, praise people. You're amazing. You're the expert. We need you at this table. We need your resources to help with this. And it worked. It worked, right? And so we have really been on an upward movement in our state. And we're so thankful. Again, Father Jeff Bahi, he's been doing summits. First Lady Donna Edwards has been doing summits. Our office has been hosting summits. We have brought together every key person across this state to address this issue. We're now working, we just finished a site visit with the state of Texas. The governor's office in the state of Texas has a child sex trafficking team. We just took a team of leaders from our state to meet with their leaders. We are developing the state's first care coordination model, which is very key. And with legislation passed by Senator Mizell last session, we now have over $2 million to put to create a care coordination model, which will really close in the gaps. So when a victim is identified, they will enter into a system where at every entry point, They will have someone there, an advocate, a CSA advocate. They will have a key staff person, someone at every point of the way, a multidisciplinary team staffing, high-level folks at every step of the way, monitoring what services do you need, what's needed to help you get to a place of healing and justice. So we are so thrilled. It takes money, it takes collaboration, it takes resources, but I'm pleased to say that our state has stepped up to the plate and we are putting together this model as we speak. Last year, we launched the state's first resource directory and website, and I have a picture of it here. We launched the state's first web-based resource directory. Any citizen, victim, provider, service provider can go to this website and learn basic information about human sex and labor trafficking. We have videos. This website was developed with our Survivor Advisory Council. It is a best practice website, and we are so proud of it. If you look at that logo there for the website, it was designed with a survivor. That koi fish was a tattoo off of one of our survivors, and it's a Japanese symbol which stands for courage, resilience, and perseverance. And I will tell you, her story is on that website. You must go and read it. But she told us, I'll give you a snippet just because it's so good. But that tattoo replaced a brand that she had on her leg from her trafficker. And that trafficker told her, in order for you to leave me, I will cut this brand off of you if you try to leave me. She got the courage one day to leave and replace that tattoo with that koi fish. So I'll let you read the rest of the story. But again, this is just a sample of how we listen to survivors and we include them in every step of the way. So we are so proud of this website. We have so many resources and toolkits for anyone to go on there and print materials. Trainings. With the Louisiana Child and Youth Collaborative, we were able to staff the state with regional care coordinators across the state. So we used over $900,000 of those dollars from the federal government to put trafficking specific staff across the state. They're responsible for trainings within their respective communities, advocacy, the multidisciplinary team meetings, establishing those, et cetera. One of the things we heard was that, hey, we don't have, from agencies when we did the summits, was that we don't have enough capacity within our agency to dedicate a staff person to address this issue. So we thought it important so that no child slipped through the cracks, to put staff across the state, and they're in place as we speak. The staff are housed at the child advocacy centers across the state, and this is just a listing of where our regional care coordinators are located and housed. Another very important effort that we were able to achieve through the federal funding from the federal government was the SEED. So one of the things we heard from our stakeholders through the summits were, we really don't know how to identify. We even heard from law enforcement who says, look, sometimes we pull, folks over and, it looks like a criminal act. It looks like theft. It looks like carjacking. It looks like prostitution. But behind that, it could be a victim of human sex or labor trafficking. And so we borrowed a best practice screening tool that was vetted and used in over 28 states. We were able to purchase and have a contract with the West Coast Children's Clinic. So we have since trained over 150 providers in our state to use a best practice screening tool on how to identify a victim of human sex trafficking. We're excited that we now have this tool digitized and in a Lighthouse software platform. And I will close with the Stop Trafficking, Human Trafficking is Real. In April, during the NCAA tournament, First Lady Donna Edwards launched the state's first statewide human trafficking awareness campaign. And so we are so excited. We've been all over the state hosting trainings, education. We now have a virtual training. The NCAA staff trained all of their staff weeks prior to the tournament. They used our virtual training to train all of their staff. The Office of the Orleans Communications District, the 911, they trained all of their staff. The Superdome trained all of their staff on what to look for prior to that event. And so we're just excited. We're continuing this campaign across the state. Human trafficking is real. The REAL stands for recognizing the signs, educating others, and acting immediately, listening and supporting survivors. One of the things we heard many years ago is that people wanted to know, is this real? So we're very proud. Yes, it is real. The folders that we have at the door, you can grab one on your way out. There's a poster that we share with our stakeholders, businesses. People say, how can we get involved? A simple way is to share this poster. These are posters that folks can put up in restrooms, you can put up in hotels, you can put up at your place of business or other important venue. And then lastly, these sticky notes, and I'll share this with you. There's one in the folder. These are very important. You say, what is this, and what in the world could we do with a sticky note? These were designed by our survivor. One survivor said that the only place she could go to escape her trafficker was the restroom. And so we borrowed these from her, and their logo is on there in addition to ours. But we give these out. We have thousands of them. We give these out across the state and tell folks, if you want to help, keep these in your purse or somewhere, and you could just put one on the back of a restroom stall. Just pop it back there. And it says, get help, get out. And we have them in different languages as well. So again, there's very simple, education and awareness is key. Our victims are, when they're ready, they'll take something like this, remember a number, and say, hey, when I'm ready, I'll text that number. That's to there's a number to the national hotline and to Louisiana State Police as well. So we're thankful. We're thankful to all of our partners across the state. We are working with our medical systems. We have badge buddies that we've created where now Our Lady of the Lake, the hospital staff, we had a training with physicians, surgeons, nurses. They're now wearing this as a part of their indicators and badges. So we're so proud of that. And we're also partnering with our universities. So First Lady Donna Edwards and my office, we hosted a meeting with university presidents across the state. We have we did a presentation to our SGA presidents across the state just this past weekend. We're going into the universities to provide key information on indicators, what to look for, so that our students can be safe as well. So with that, I invite you to reach out to our office. All of our materials are free due to our state and federal funding. And so please, we have a room filled to capacity with materials and supplies that we stand ready to share with stakeholders across the state.
I just want to let everyone, we've had a juvenile facility for young girls for 4.5 years. We've served 77 children. 76 of them have been Louisiana residents. This is not migration trafficking. And 42% of the juveniles are trafficked by their primary caregiver. Our youngest request was for a 4-year-old little girl.
Yes.
We have time for some questions.
Yes.
Questions?
It's been so informational about the victim side. How do we stop the cycle? How do we, when someone is identified and rescued, you stop the trafficker? How are we attacking that?
Yes, so we're working with our DA's association and DA prosecutors. We're trying to train as many folks on the legal side as we can so that we can increase our arrests and prosecutions. But prevention is key. So also arming, our citizens on the other side is preventive work that we're engaging in.
My disclaimer is, all my TV comes in through an attic, in the attic antenna, and I don't have cable. So I probably don't represent this group or most of this group very well, but I think that movies and TV have done a lot to destroy our social norms and unimprove, I guess, the quality of life. But I've noticed that there is a huge trend in all the police shows and the detective shows that started maybe at the end of last year, but it's already in all the new season stuff. It is there.
Yes.
Sex trafficking, trafficking of folks. In your opinion, because ABC, NBC, and CBS can hit a lot more people than you can. So, in your opinion, is what is being shown on television, if you ever have any chance to watch, true to what we need to know about who does this, how they get away with it, what law enforcement can do? Is that a worthwhile resource for us to pay attention to?
Some of the things we see in the media portrayed in the movies is accurate, some. However, trafficking has many different looks. It can go unnoticed for many years. Psychological coercion. So it could be a family member trafficking her children, and those type of cases we don't see, in the movies. But it's right there. Familial trafficking is on the rise. Online solicitation is on the rise. So there are trafficking has so many different looks.
Thank you for your work. I do a lot of homeland security work,
Yes.
and in one of my travels out to do a facility in Southern California that also had facilities in Tijuana, I did a human trafficking audit, security audit for them, and we did find an underground tunnel that
Yes.
they were using from one of their Tijuana warehouses. Two questions for you related to that. In my travels out, I did a connecting flight through the Houston airport, and I noticed at least 4 or 5 different, I can show you a picture of it, but it's an ad done by the Homeland Security Investigations Office, showing a 1-800 number, showing what things to look for, things like that. And I do a lot of traveling through both Baton Rouge and New Orleans airport, and I don't see those types of things in those airports, number one. Number two, if you could address that, and then the second thing I'd like for you to address is I noticed on your statistics is that you had, it's a little bit less, but it's nearly the same amount of by race for white and African American, and African American in the state are much less. And I was wondering if you could tell us why that might be attributed to that.
Sure. So to address your first question, we've not yet tapped the airports. If you have a resource or contact, please reach out to us. We would love to partner with them and supply them with education and awareness materials. But again, we're trying to reach out to every entity possible. And to address the second question, reporting is important. So the information that we get is from those who actually present to our service agencies and our community-based agencies. So, there could be that the African-American population may not be as comfortable reporting to some of the agencies, or so that's what I would say. Mm-hmm.
One more.
Have you seen an increase since the pandemic? I know your records may not go back that far, but have you seen an increase with the pandemic?
Our numbers actually from the pandemic year, the first year, showed a decrease in victims. But of course, that's because they weren't reporting to the, showing up to the clinics and to the CACs and agencies as much. So we did see a slight decrease in our numbers. But what we know is that the numbers, as folks, returned back to schools and all of that, is that we would then see another increase, because we know that with children having more access to computers, things being more virtual, that we would see an increase in online solicitation.
Dana, thank you so much.